Hello, my name is Darrell Gates. I want to congratulate my friend Dr. Tyrone Burton on his 2 books. I'm encouraging you today to get those books. If you are an educator, if you're an education stakeholder, if you teach education courses, if you are a pre-service teacher, if you are a parent, you need those books. Contact him today to get them, or they are also available at Barnes & Noble and Amazon. Congratulations, Dr. Burton.
Hello, I'm Cynthia Franklin, and I have been in education for 20 years. And during my journey, I've had the pleasure of working under Dr. Burton. I am so excited for him, and I'm glad that he's finally decided to put his wealth of knowledge in this book, More Than a Notion. If you are an educator, I highly recommend you get this book. It will definitely enhance your journey. Thank you.
Congratulations, Tyrone, on the release of your newest book, More Than a Notion.
Hello, I'm Dr. Darrell Webb, principal at Turner Elementary Middle School. I'm very excited to be a part of this book release for you, Dr. Burton. I'm proud of you. I'm blessed to be associated with you. Best luck to you.
What a pleasure to endorse Dr. Tyrone Burton on his 2nd book, More Than a Notion, A Journey into Educational Leadership in the Time of Accountability. I have heard Dr. Burton use that term more than a notion, more than once, twice, and so many times when dealing with student discipline, when recruiting teachers to his school regardless of the student's zip code, having him to say that it's more than a notion, Diane. I have to make sure that in this age of accountability that I have the best teachers, and if I have a struggling teacher, I'm going to coach them up. And that's what this book does. It is for principals, it's for educators who are looking for that blueprint, that roadmap into tapping into educational success for all children. Thank you.
On the release of your new book, More Than a Notion.
I'm Marie B. Clark, a former educator for Caddo Parish School Board. It's with great pleasure and honor for me to stand here and congratulate Dr. Burton for an excellent achievement in the authorship of his book, More Than a Notion. Dr. Burton, as I recall, is a dynamic leader who sat under my supervision for more than 10 years. Yes, it was a journey. He started in the raw, and I saw him reach perfection. Numerous hours and countless hours, Dr. Burton, we spent together. For the best of times or the worst of times, made the very best for you. Dr. Burton, congratulations on your willingness to share with administrators and up-and-coming leaders what it takes to be a great instructional leader, from the bare bones to become an instructional leader. I'm so very proud of you. May you continue in your journey in education, and God bless.
I'm Marilyn Bartlett Jackson, coordinator of the Parent Resource Center for Caddo Parish Public Schools. I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate Dr. Tyrone Burton on the publication of his 2nd book entitled More Than a Notion, A Journey in Educational Leadership in the Age of Accountability. My goodness, Dr. Burton has always been a trailblazer in education. He has been a visionary person that always wanted to know what was the best way in which to educate our children, which means accountability. Dr. Burton, continue to have us ask those important questions. Are we doing what's best for our children? Are we truly being held accountable? What does that look like? Again, congratulations, and continue to be the trailblazer.
Hello, I'm Dr. Marvin Rainey. I work for Caddo Parish Public Schools as the Executive Master Teacher, overseeing the tablet implementation for the district. I know Dr. Burton as my mentor, as a new leader coming out of the classroom. And so I recommend the book More Than a Notion to all leaders, aspiring leaders, as well as district leaders. The book is a total package. It's full of research, as well as those application of those best practices that it takes to turn around a school. So it's an amazing book and a must-have for all leaders and educators.
I'm Mildred Tolliver, president of the Rensselaerville Institute, and I've known Tyrone Burton for approximately 20 years. He is definitely an implementer. He helps not only to bring resources to principals to help with their leadership, but Tyrone is a person that helps them to implement, not just academia, but an implementer. I'm really excited about his new book, and every educator, every leader should have this book because it is one that will help them in their journey to become a better principal, a better leader, just a better of getting their purpose out for helping children.
Welcome all. I am Maisha Youngblood, and I am super excited about the book launch for More Than a Notion. I have known Dr. Tyrone Burton for several years, and he has always been an advocate for education and the go-to person in grooming future leaders in the community. I am very proud of Dr. Burton and all of his accomplishments. This book sheds light on many controversial issues in education that need to be addressed. And I am honored to be a part of this enlightened discussion that is much needed in education today. So please purchase the book, tune in, and be informed.
Congratulations, Tyrone, on your new book, More Than a Notion.
Hello, I'm Tangela Sylvie, the principal of Cherokee Park Elementary. I know Dr. Burton through his amazing leadership. I worked under him for 10 amazing years. Dr. Burton, I would like to congratulate you and give you your flowers while you're alive. Kudos on your amazing launch of your book, More Than a Notion. I recommend anyone and everyone to read it.
Good evening, and welcome to the virtual book launch of Dr. Tyrone Burton's second book, More Than a Notion, A Journey in Educational Leadership in the Age of Accountability. I am your host and moderator for the evening's event, Dr. Perry Daniel. Our program for this evening will consist of 4 segments. Segment 1 will include principles. Segment 2, aspiring principal. Segment 3, central office leaders. And segment 4, college professors and educational company consultants. Each group will be discussing different aspects of Dr. Burton's book, More Than a Notion, and identifying either chapters or topics that resonated with them as a form of their professional experience or things that they've learned that they think will be valuable for future leaders. So we'll start today by introducing our first set of panelists. First, we'll have Dr. Darrell Webb, a principal at Turner Elementary Middle School. Dr. Tanya Walker, principal of PS 136, the Roy Wilkins School in Queens, New York. And Mrs. Tangela Sylvie, principal of Cherokee Park Elementary School in Shreveport. Before we get started, we're going to ask everyone to please go to visit us at passiondrivenleadership.org and like the page, and you'll be able to find more about Dr. Burton there as well as the book. But we're going to get started with our first segment with our principals. Good evening to you all.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Okay.
Good evening.
Okay, so we can hear everyone. That's good. So what we want to do first is want to ask that each one of our panelists will share what topic or subject in the book that really just kind of resonated with you or stood out to you. And we'll start with you first, Dr. Walker.
So good evening, and it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm excited to discuss More Than a Notion. Chapter 6 in the book really resonated with me, the balancing act, the vicissitudes of life. Because as principals, we try to balance everything, we try to manage everything, and we make everything okay for everyone else. But this chapter really talks about making it okay for ourselves. And what are we doing as we take care of everyone else? What are we doing for ourselves to make sure that we are okay? So the chapter I'll be speaking about is chapter 6, the balancing act, the vicissitudes of life.
Thank you, Dr. Walker. And now we'll ask same question for Dr. Sylvie. I'm sorry, Ms. Sylvie.
Hello again. Chapter 3 is the chapter that I will talk about that resonated with me the most, the branding process. Because we know as principals, a school now is a business. So we have to make sure that we have to brand ourselves so we can get some innovative teachers and also recruit students to come to our school. What I like the most about it, when Dr. Burton talked about all like Tony the Tiger, he's great. Um, Burger King, have it your way. Even schools supposed to have to have a certain motto. So at Cherokee Park is the Cherokee Park experience. So we have to just tag along with those branding and doing everything that we can to better our business. So that's pretty much what I'll talk about in this segment, chapter 3.
Okay, thank you very much. And I will now turn to Dr. Webb. Can you share your insight and from the book that you would like to share or speak on this evening?
Chapter as Ms. Sylvie with the branding process. That chapter resonated with me. Basically, there was one area Dr. Burton mentioned. This problem is compounded by the fact that the media spreads messages of gross inequity and inequality by not informing viewers of the whole story. And so for me, that's what makes branding stick out. You know, we have to tell the story that we want to be told. Most of the time, our kind of schools don't really get the experience actually told to our community. So it's our job to actually tell our side, and that consists of finding a brand, something that parents will believe in, something your faculty and staff will believe in, something that will actually recruit and retain teachers just by the story being told. And so for me, that story resonated with me most simply because we have to tell our own story.
Hey, thank you very much, Dr. Webb. Now we're gonna go back to Dr. Walker. I want to go deeper with you on that balancing act and thinking about how we are still responsible for being successful, leading the school, and realizing that when you become a leader, the world doesn't stop for you. The school leader is important, but your life requirements don't stop. The world doesn't stop for you. Can you speak to that for us?
Absolutely, absolutely. As a principal, you know, I felt it was my responsibility to be the first one in the school with the custodians, literally watching the sunrise, and to be the last one in the building as everyone is gone and the custodians say, okay, you have, 30 more minutes. And I did that for many years and then went home and took work with me as well. So I was sacrificing sort of my home life for my professional career, which I felt was okay because I absolutely love what I do. And I felt that I had to give my all. But I've been a principal for 15 years now. And through time, I have realized I was not necessarily practicing what I preach. And in More Than a Notion, that is what Dr. Burton is talking about. He's saying that we, as principals, we have a lot of stressors. We're responsible for all of our children, all of their parents, anything that happens on the weekends, even if we don't live in the community, it comes to us and we handle it. We handle it with class and with care, and we make sure everyone is okay. But in the end, are we really taking care of ourselves too? So Dr. Burton mentions that there are 8 laws of health that we should be very, very cognizant of as passion-driven leaders. And they are fresh air, just appreciating fresh air, sunshine, temperance, getting rest, exercise, drinking water, nutrition, and trusting in a divine power. And that can get us through regardless of what the stresses are, whether we're managing them and coping with them. We need to go back to, what our real purpose is. And are we taking care of ourselves so that we can give of our best selves to everyone?
I think you hit the nail on the head with that. You're not going to be able to be 100% and to give your best if you're not taking care of yourself. Now, Dr. Burton mentioned a couple of things about the stress and how you choose to deal with it and not letting it get the best of it. What are some of the things that you do to help with stress for yourself?
For myself personally, I have been into mindfulness before it became a buzzword. I have been practicing mindfulness, but I also realized as a part of it, I needed to get more sleep because I was the principal that was staying up late at night, sending emails at 1 and 2 in the morning, not expecting anyone to respond, except of course my assistant principal who always respond. But I realized that I needed to put away social media sometimes and take time for myself. So when I go to bed and I set a bedtime, I no longer look at cell phones, no longer look at computers. When I wake up in the morning, the first thing I no longer do is roll over and grab my cell phone, because there was a time that I'd wake up, roll over, grab my cell phone, and I start, responding to any email, somebody's absent or whatever, whatever emails came in since I last looked at it. I don't do that anymore because it starts my day with stress. And that's not the best way to start my day. So going outside, getting fresh air in the morning, or even doing morning stretches has helped me. Just kind of doing yoga poses right outside, looking out the window, has helped me start my day in a more calming way, less stress, and it helps me get through the day too. So how you start the day is how you finish the day. And I've noticed an improvement and a change in my life and in my health once I started doing those things consistently. Consistency is very important.
Thank you for sharing. I'll turn to Mrs. Sylvie now. Ms. Sylvie, when you speak of branding and you're thinking about Cherokee Park, what are some of the things you put in place to develop and then communicate your brand? We still have you on mute. Yeah.
Yep. Let me unmute myself. Yeah, the things that I do at Cherokee Park to brand teachers or through the process is getting a team that you trust, that will actually that believes in your vision and help you execute your vision. That's one thing that I truly believe in, is just growing leaders around me, making sure that they're a part of the decision making. And we being consistent. We do the treat trolley where we go around and appreciate teachers every Friday, but you have to do that all the time, being consistent, and it takes a team. Principals is we have a lot on our plate to do. We have to learn how to delegate some of those duties, because it's pretty much a balancing act. So those are some of the things for branding, that you just have to be consistent, have a team that will help you execute your vision so that you can, so they can articulate it along with the stakeholders, your community partners, teachers, board members. And so all of us saying the same, one team, one goal, that we can achieve it all together.
Thank you. Dr. Webb, would you want to chime in on your thoughts on the brand?
I can. And I can actually agree with Ms. Sylvia with the consistency piece. That's one thing that I find is critical to the branding process. And in my experience, I just try to lead by example. And that's one of the things that kind of sell the brand for me most, just because I'm always in the front lines. If I ask someone to do it, I'm going to be out there first. I get to work at 6, get to do it before everyone else. I'm always in the front when parents come up, so parents know they can talk to me, they can speak with me. They know I won't have a conference with them during carpool, but they know that I can speak with them. So that's part of some things that parents are just used to. They know what to expect when they come to campus. A lot of times we have staff members just kind of watching to make sure how you react to certain situations, being cursed out, being, disrespected or whatnot. And I know Dr. Bird mentioned in this book, in that chapter, it's all about customer service and how you treat your customers. And with us being in the school, our students and parents are our customers. And so a lot of people want to see the reaction that you have when it gets a little heated. My staff know that I don't react. I smile. I may throw a little shade. I may, say something professional, yet kind of clapping back, as they say. But I do keep it professional, and I listen. And that's something that's hard to do sometimes when it becomes heated, to just sit back and just listen to your parents, listen to every word they have, every curse word, every piece of action they have. And that's something that I feel is big with my staff, just knowing that they won't get a reaction out of it, but at the same time that I'll do what needs to be done for the safety of the students and the parents on campus.
Hey, thank you all. Thank you both for sharing that. Now, Dr. Webb, you mentioned one piece. How do you use being out at carpool to build the brand?
That's part of my relationships. every morning I'm out there. It's one thing that my secretary, everyone knows that I don't take phone calls. I don't take text messages. I don't take, hey, I'm gonna be late. I don't take any of that during the carpool time. That's my time to greet students, build a relationship with students, high five, kind of talk a little bit about what's been going on. Parents, and speaking of parents, we have the same cars in the same positions every morning, so we know those parents. May get out there early and talk to them a little bit, kind of shoot the breeze, talk about the draft, talk about different things. Just kind of building that relationship to let parents know that we're more than just a school. We do care more about their students than just a number. We interested, and so that's an investment in the community. And that's something that I've been doing, that I continue to do. Afternoon carpool doesn't always go as planned. I plan to be out there every afternoon, but some things do come up at times. But morning, I'm there regardless. And I won't be out. I will not be out there unless I'm not at work. But that's an awesome time for me to just kind of keep those relationships built with parents and students. And so we have about 1,400 or so students. And so between carpool, we see maybe like 500-600 of them every morning. And of course, I don't greet every one of them, but I get about a third of them. So, yeah.
But that's a third that you get to say good morning to,
yeah,
and get to say something positive to the parents.
Exactly.
Ms. Sylvie, I want to ask you were going to chime in. Go ahead.
Yeah, I totally agree with Dr. Webb, because our parents, it's pretty much word of mouth. To me, that's the data that Dr. Burton talked in More Than a Notion, that you have to have that perception data of see what the community think about you. So if you're out in front of your school every morning greeting them, hello, how you doing? I'll get gradual conversation is just bonding with them to let them know. So being out there, duty is very, very essential for a principal, because that's when we actually see those parents coming through the line, that we greet them, we just have that type of energy. So because they're actually our advertisement, they're our word of mouth. So we have to make sure that they see us working in the community and in school.
Well, you hit on what I was going to go to next, but I also wanted to give Dr. Walker, she was nodding her head a couple of times. I wanted to see if she wanted to chime in on the branding on chapter 3 about branding.
Yes, I agree 100%. Being out there makes you accessible to the families. So they can't say that they try to contact you or something, because you were there, you were always there. And that accessibility makes a difference in your relationship. And so when you're having a conversation with a child that may not be so favorable, they know you have a conversation with their parent every single morning. So it builds a relationship between you and the child and you and the parent. So just being out there, just being in the know is extremely important.
Yes. The final question I'll have in reference to branding, and I'll ask you, this will go to you, Mrs. Sylvie. What steps are you all taking at Cherokee Park to share your brand externally, to go outside of your traditional stakeholders, outside of the parents, outside of your students, outside of your initial community? What are you all doing to brand what's happening at Cherokee Park?
Well, since we're in COVID, we really didn't do that much this year, because we were had to practice social distance. A lot of CDC guidelines hindered us from actually doing some things that we normally do externally by bringing those stakeholders in. But some examples are that we had a Black History Fund run when we actually got the community together. We worked with the school. They came out. We did a 2-mile run. We recognized some of the stakeholder community leaders at the event. Our boys and girls were able to see the teachers, principal, all of us as humans, because they always see us with our professional hat on. So that was the day that we had barbecue, bounce houses, just for the community to see that, because so is the school, so is the community. So we just try to make sure that we get out in the community and merge with the school and the community merging, so we can have a positive relationship with the parents and other stakeholders. And also Facebook page. That's one of the things that we have to do in the digital era, is to actually get out on Facebook. And I catch a lot of people that way that's not part of the Cherokee Park community, but that just follow us, like to see some of the things that we do. So social media, partnering with recreational centers, some things like that we do with our branding.
Okay. Thank you very much for sharing that. We're coming to a close on our first segment. And what I'll ask of each panelist to give us 1 minute that will reference back to the book and how you plan to use these tools that you've learned or been exposed to from Dr. Burton in More Than a Notion. So we'll start with you, Dr. Webb. If you can give us a 1 minute closure.
Okay. I would reference back to chapter 2, Finding and Refining Effective Leadership in the book. With that, Dr. Burton had mentioned the 9 types of people who never succeed at work, and because of their lack of emotional intelligence. And those are some things that, just reading that, I can identify individuals on my campus that meet each one of those criteria. And for me, just trying to look at knowing how they are, trying to learn how to deal with it now. And because it is a label, there has to be a solution to it. And so those individuals will get from me a little attention, just to kind of make sure that I'm just aware of their label and how I'm actually treating it, and what am I doing to try to make it benefit the campus. That area really resonated with me, just reading and saying, hey, I know this person on campus. I know this person on campus. So I plan to actually try to look at different ways to address those individuals to make them successful on work to benefit the campus.
Hey, thank you for sharing that and connecting that back to the text. We'll go next to Mrs. Sylvie. If you will give us a 1 minute final statements on whether on the branding or any other components of the book that you would like to speak to.
One of the components of the book that I would like to speak to is about, you can't grow your company, organization, or business on those leadership or your leadership team if you can't grow yourself. So I took that, and that really resonated with me, because principals have to know their strengths and weaknesses in order to be effective. And so once you can identify and be reflective yourself, you can grow others around you. And I think that's one thing that our principals need to know. Just we're not experts in everything, but if we find those right team members, those right people that we put in place, building human capacity, we can actually be effective, because it's not one of us that's smarter than all of us. So just making sure that surrounding yourself with people that's able to articulate your vision, help you execute it, and just making sure that you refine yourself as well. Principals have to reflect also to make sure we have our grows and glows. And so just being a reflective principal, because it makes everyone else around you reflective.
I think those are great points. Even in chapter 2, Dr. Burton speaks about finding and refining effective leadership, and speaks specifically to emotional intelligence. And it's important that you know yourself in order to be able to best to lead and support the people that you're serving. So, Dr. Walker, you're going to close out this segment with the principals. So, can you give us your one minute closure on what resonates you the most, or what you're going to take with you from More Than a Notion?
Many things resonated me, but the last one I will speak about is, you really can't have success without successors. Building a team, building leaders, building someone who is going to take your place when you leave. Understanding that you did come and you will go, and during that entire time you have given your all, and you've put so many things in place, and you've developed so many people, that when it's time for you to go, you will be okay, and the school will continue to thrive because of all that you've done in the school and all that you have brought to the school, the people, the programs, and it's going to be okay. And his quote is, to know when to lead, follow, or get out of the way, you must have balance. So our principalship is all a balancing act from the very beginning till the very end.
Thank you, and I think that is a great way for us to segue and remind everyone about our guests, our panelists here, and giving you their names: Dr. Darrell Webb from Turner Elementary Middle School, Dr. Tanya Walker, the principal from PS 136, and Mrs. Tangela Sylvie, the principal at Cherokee Park Elementary. And as we're closing out our first segment, I want to remind everyone that you can go to the website, passiondrivenleadership.org. You can also purchase the book More Than a Notion on Amazon. And we also want to recognize a few of the people that are with us today. I want to make sure we call out a few people. We see Cynthia Lawson from Frankfort, Kentucky. Glad that you've joined us. Willetta Burks from Tulsa, Oklahoma. Thank you for joining as well. Then we hear Audiomu Asante from Nashville, as well as Devon Lewis from Brooklyn, New York. Winston Daly from Boston, Massachusetts. Nicole Johnson from Fort Worth, Texas. Also want to encourage everyone to find Dr. Burton on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Dr. Tyrone Burton. We're going to go to a break and just want to let you know that our next segment will focus on aspiring leader, as we have a few panelists that are looking to the principal role as a future title for themselves. So we're here.
Hello, my name is Daryl Gates. I want to congratulate my friend Dr. Tyrone Burton on his 2 books. I'm encouraging you today to get those books. If you are an educator, if you're an education stakeholder, if you teach education courses, if you are a pre-service teacher, if you are a parent, you need those books. Contact him today to get them, or they are also available at Barnes & Noble and Amazon. Congratulations, Dr. Burton.
Hello, I'm Cynthia Franklin, and I have been in education for 20 years. And during my journey, I've had the pleasure of working under Dr. Burton. I am so excited for him, and I'm glad that he's finally decided to put his wealth of knowledge in this book, More Than a Notion. If you are an educator, I highly recommend you get this book. It will definitely enhance your journey. Thank you.
Congratulations, Tyrone, on the release of your newest book, More Than a Notion.
Hello, I'm Dr. Darrell Webb, principal at Turner Elementary Middle School. I'm very excited to be a part of this book release for you, Dr. Burton. I'm proud of you. I'm blessed to be associated with you. Best luck to you. Hello, I'm Dr.
I'm Wanda Burton. I'm the wife of Tyrone Burton. I just want to take this opportunity to congratulate him on his second book, More Than a Notion. We are indeed so very proud of him and look forward to more books to come.
What a pleasure to endorse Dr. Tyrone Burton on his second book, More Than a Notion, A Journey into Educational Leadership in the Time of Accountability. I have heard Dr. Burton use that term, more than a notion, more than once, twice, and so many times when dealing with student discipline, when recruiting teachers to his school, regardless of the student's zip code, having him to say that it's more than a notion, Diane. I have to make sure that in this age of accountability that I have the best teachers, and if I have a struggling teacher, I'm going to coach them up. And that's what this book does. It is for principals, it's for educators who are looking for that blueprint, that roadmap into tapping into educational success for all children. Thank you. What a pleasure to endorse Dr. Tyrone Burton on his second book, More Than a Notion, A Journey into Educational Leadership in
I'm Marie B. Clark, a former educator for Caddo Parish School Board. It's with great pleasure and honor for me to stand here and congratulate Dr. Burton for an excellent
Good evening, and welcome back to the virtual book launch of More Than a Notion by Dr. Tyrone Burton. In this segment 2, we will be speaking with aspiring principals. Our guests are Van Phillips Jr., who's a mentor teacher at Cherokee Park Elementary School in Shreveport, Louisiana. Tamisha Brown, Advanced Academic Specialist from Katherine Johnson Technology Magnet Academy in DeSoto, Texas. And Maisha Baker Youngblood, the Reading Specialist also at Cherokee Park Elementary. So, first of all, I want to thank you all for agreeing to participate and want to take some time over the next 25 or 30 minutes to talk about what resonated with you in the book, More Than a Notion. So I got a chance to hear some of your comments when you did your tapings for Dr. Burton. So I'm asking that you will at least be willing to give a little bit of energy for our guests that are joining us tonight. So we'll start with Mrs. Youngblood. Share with us a point or two that resonated with you from the book.
Chapter 3 is a chapter that I really enjoyed. It was about branding, and success is all about growing others. And for me, stepping into a leadership role is kind of honing in on those key attributes that people have that I can groom them into a leadership role so they can take my place. So for me, it's being in an atmosphere and knowing, okay, this is what I bring to the table. I see that my principal is grooming me, so I want to be able to hone in on those people on my campus and be able to groom them as well.
Hey, thank you very much. And Mrs. Brown, will you share what part of the book that resonated or a chapter that resonated with you?
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone. Chapter 7 definitely resonated with me, a call to action. I am at the point of my educational career where I'm finally accepting my calling. And if I can just go back to many times Mr. Burton, was pulling me and stretching me to grow myself and to accept my call to action. And back during that time, I did not accept my call, or I was running from my calling, but I'm here now and I am ready to accept my call to action.
Great point. Great point. Now we'll hear a few words from Van Phillips Jr.
Can y'all hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think kind of echo the sentiments of Ms. Youngblood. Chapter 3 really hit home, and not per se from the branding aspect, but more from the verbiage aspect. As a young educator, aspiring to get into the administration, a lot of the times what us young educators we lack is the particular verbiage that a more seasoned educator might have over them from just being in the profession as long as they've been in the profession. And one thing, chapter 3, that I really enjoyed is when critiquing somebody, it's specific verbiage that you use that's not what's the word I'm looking for? Hmm.
I'm gonna help you out, brother. I'm gonna help you out.
What? Because
I think the word that you're looking for, you don't want to. You want to be able to give a critique without destroying a person or not tearing them down. So constructive, making it more constructive.
Exactly. It's more. I guess you say constructive than destructive. If you just, for lack of better words.
I think that's it. You will want to be very constructive as you're critiquing, particularly in this field of education where it's so easy to be torn down. So I think we all want to be constructive and build leaders. So I want to come back to you, Mr. Phillips.
Yes, sir.
When you think about the brand and looking at yourself or trying to move to the next level, what are some things as a particularly young black male educator, what is it in the book that just says, hey, this is key for me as I want to move forward?
As a young black educator, and specifically teaching in the areas that I teach in, understanding how political the educational field can be is something that is new to me. When I got into this particular profession, just to strictly help kids. I'm not really the politics type guy. I'm not really I don't really coincide with some of the theories and some of the things that they stand upon. And so as I was, again, kind of going back to just chapter 3, understanding how you can, I guess you could say, use politics to your, advantage, or don't allow it to represent such or have such a negative connotation behind it. And so chapter 3, again, just that branding process as far as building relationships outside of the school to get people to help grow your school. Because a lot of times, just as teachers, and because I am a teacher, a lot of times as teachers, we're like, I don't want anybody really in my room. You know, if I can kind of keep you out, I'm gonna keep you out. You know, if you're gonna come in, let me know when you're gonna come in. And so what chapter 3 really taught me how to do is, okay, how do you build those relationships outside of school? Because I think we teachers, we don't really attempt to build relationships outside of school. You know, the relationships that we really kind of nurture are the relationships that we have just amongst our classroom doors. And so with chapter 3, again, understanding how to brand yourself outside of school, because now I'm not branding myself as a young black educator or just a young black man. I'm now branding an entire school. I'm branding basically a company, you know, and a company that I don't really own. So you move differently, and you have to move differently. You have to speak to people differently. You have to rub elbows with different types of people when you're kind of existing in that type of space. So again, chapter 3, just understanding how to brand yourself in the political field, because that's something, if I'm just going to be honest, as a aspiring educator, I'm not as comfortable with when it comes to politics.
Understood. Mrs. Brown, we're going to come to you next. And if you'll speak to that call to action and what steps you need to take in reference to that.
I'm again new on the journey, just knowing that in order to have a spirit of excellence and to brand ourselves and our leadership styles, it really takes a lot, you know, and you do devote a lot of your family time. And just knowing that, as the book said, you're going to be ostracized, you're going to be criticized, and there's going to be extreme cases of being demoralized. And so being able to, at any day, any point of the day, walk with your head up and not with it down. And just knowing that if you put the kids' best interests first and you are doing the right thing, and kind of going back to what the other speaker talked about, just knowing that when you have to have those crucial conversations, saying the things in the right way, sometimes not the way we want to say them, or even sometimes others, even when they don't deserve it, but dealing with them accordingly in the right manner. All of that just kind of couples with knowing that you're in this role, knowing that you're not going to always be accepted. And as Mr. Burton used to always say, knowing that in leadership, you will walk alone most days. So going back to the call of action, it just for me helps me to understand that while I'm accepting this calling, I have to also understand that there are going to be days where I'm walking alone. There are going to be more days than most that people don't understand me. But as long as I keep the kids' best interest at heart, then everything will be fine.
I think those are great points. Definitely know that sometimes you, as a leader, you don't have many people that you can talk to about your experiences, as well as knowing that everyone's not going to have your view because they don't have your information. So keeping that in mind as you're communicating with the team. Ms. Youngblood, I want to turn to you now and come back to the piece that resonated with you and ask that you can expound on it a little bit.
As far as growing future leaders, I know chapter 3, again, we're on the branding. Again, that's one of the powerful chapters that I really enjoyed again. It says, illiterate to those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. And when you're transitioning leaders, you're going to have those same people, but your approach has to be different because you're a different person than that person was. So for me, it's like knowing what you're walking into and knowing what you possess. Knowing you know these people, you're at the school. If you're going to transition at that school, you know those people and you know the necessary steps. You know you're not the same person that was the previous leader. So making the adjustment, stepping into the community, making the connection with those parents and letting those parents know that, hey, you know, it's going to be okay. And it's getting yourself out there early and not waiting until you get in that leadership role. It's kind of grooming those parents so it'll be an easy transition. So for me, branding is very vital because if the parents, honestly, let's be completely transparent, if the parent does not know you, 10 times out of 10, from the type of school that I'm at, they're not going to like you initially until you prove to them that they can trust you. And with trust, that trust goes a long way. And Dr. Burton reiterated that so many times in his book. Trust goes a long way in just academics. You have that trust of the parent, the community, you can go much farther getting out and getting into the streets and impacting the neighborhood. And the kids are just, it'll all come. Little Johnny ain't gonna be acting up because mama gonna be right up there at the school on the spot because they respect the teacher. They respect the principal. They respect what the school stands for in that community.
I think the key thing that you said that really Dr. Burton highlighted a lot in the book is trust. And trust is a true action word. And I think at the core of every relationship, team or any organization that is strong, there's a sense of trust amongst the members. And Dr. Burton highlighted the importance of trust a lot. I say that trust is an action word because you have to do something to prove it. And so often in our work, it's so easy to break down that trust, but much harder to rebuild it. So that's something I would encourage you all to continue to look at how important trust is in your work, especially as you're grooming new leaders. And as you're growing and looking for that next phase, look at those people that are ahead of you and be able to, you kind of put them through under a microscope, especially now that you have this book, More Than a Notion, you have this blueprint, something that you can hold them to. So I want to encourage you to do that. I want to ask one other question, and I'll come to you, Ms. Brown. Are there any other things in reference to, we mentioned branding. You've also mentioned a little bit of some things from other chapters that overlap, particularly just knowing yourself. Like you said, you ran from your calling. So what would you share, not only things that you're going to live by, but you would give that person or share with that person that was you 10 years ago or 5 years ago? What would you tell that person from this, that connects to More Than a Notion? What would you share with them?
I think I would share that it's okay to be you in this career. And I think that that's part of what had me on the run. I would see other people doing it and doing it well. And I didn't think that that could be me. But also in the book, Mr. Burton says, if not you, then who? And so that really resonated with me. And I thought about it for so long. I said, for so long I ran, from this calling, knowing. And I think at the end of the day, I knew that I had the ability to do, but I didn't want to be ostracized. I didn't want to be demoralized. I didn't want to be set apart. But I've always been set apart if I'm honest about it. And so me just being who I am, or for another aspiring leader, just be who you are. Accept the call, because I think for the most part with many callings, we actually know that we are called to do that thing, but we run from it because we don't want that ostracization. But that's okay too. And so I would just speak to the point of receive the calling, be who you are in the calling, accept it, and do well with what you do best. No one can do you better than you. And so here I am today doing me like no one else can do. And so, but I also realized that in this role, you have to be sensitive. You have to offer grace. You have to, offer understanding. When you are a leader, oftentimes, and I tell people this all the time, and it's one thing that I, have learned from just my my relationship with my pastor. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I think in the career, I oftentimes saw people mistreat people because of their role, because of their position, because of their title. So we also have to be sensitive in what we do as well, and understand that we've got to know who we're dealing with, know how to deal with them, as Mr. Burton talked about in the book as well, and just be sensitive to, the people that we serve, whether it be our scholars, whether it be the family members of the scholars, the people, who we impact on our campuses, just that community of people, because what we do, it has lasting effects. And so we just have to be careful so that we have the right impact. But going back to what you just said, or what you asked, if I had to tell any aspiring leader, anything about accepting the call to action, I would say, know that you are capable and no one can do you better than you.
Hey, I'm going to have to take that and run with it. I think Dr. Burton mentioned in his book about the cost of greatness is responsibility, or the price of greatness is a responsibility. And I think about that when it comes down to talking about your brand. I think we can all think of companies that made a mistake or did something that was bad for their brand. I think we could all think of organizations that have had some issues. So to Mr. Phillips, I'm gonna come to you now and say, based on what you've learned and reference the book as well, what would you share with your younger self as a first year teacher? What would you, now that you've learned a little bit, you have some experience, you've read the book, what would you share with that young man who was a first year teacher just coming into the profession?
Man, I was 21, not a lick of facial hair, not a clue how to teach. I remember my first year, I got into school. I got into school like August. I got my first job in August. I passed my test so I can get into school at the end of July. So I didn't know what I was doing. So if I had one piece of advice, I would definitely have to go to chapter 2. And it more speaks towards leaders, but it also can speak towards teachers, like identifying who exactly are you. And I think the quicker teachers, leaders, anyone, husbands, wives, the sooner you realize and the sooner the people that you work with realize who you are, I think the more successful the relationship that can exist within that space. So in chapter 2, I remember Dr. Burton referenced the four types of leaders. I'm not mistaken. It was artesian, guardian, rationalist, and I think an idealist, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's an idealist. And when you start breaking down who you are as a leader, it kind of breaks down who you are as a person. And so if 8 years later, teacher tells first year teacher, first identify who it is that you are as an educator, because especially right now when social media is so prevalent and you see so many of these quote unquote great social media lessons, like, because there's a lot out there, and I probably have been victim of putting out one or two. So you get so consumed with these great lessons, a lot of teachers forget, and they don't quite connect with the type of teacher they are because they see that lesson was so great. I want to go do that. Or they see, just the way that teacher connected with that student. You know what? I'm going to do that. But if you don't really understand who you are as a teacher, as a leader, as a person, again, one thing I got from chapter 2, you can never really make a connection with the possible relationship that you want to have with somebody, whether that be child, whether that be employee, whether that be, again, spouse, just whomever, just understanding who you are as a person. I mean, just for the health of the relationship, I think it's foundational. It's almost non-negotiable, understanding who you just truly are as a person.
And I think that's very important. It's important that you first know yourself before you can and know how you can really kind of discipline yourself before you can truly lead and know how you have to correct and support other people. I think when we think about I'm an old school Baptist, and they used to say, you're gonna come in your own way. This is what you, as an educator, you have to come in your own way. You have to be authentic, and I think Dr. Burton speaks to that when he talks about the importance of emotional intelligence and how important it is to know who you are.
Can I ask you a question? Yes, sir. As a CEO, like, how difficult is it kind of navigating through kind of like a world that doesn't look like you? From a leadership standpoint, because when you step into a room, you don't look like a lot of people, but you still carry the same title as a lot of people. And so, like as a young educator, as a young aspiring leader, what advice would you have for somebody like me? I'm in year 8. I want to do administration. I'm gonna be honest. I'm 1 foot in and I'm 1 foot out, because sometimes, I love it because the range that I can have to touch people, but sometimes I hate it because of the white tape and the yellow tape around what I really want to do for these kids. So asking you, somebody who has kind of seen the other side of what I'm trying to see, what would you have for me as far as identifying who I am?
Okay, I'll start with this. I'm actually not a CEO, but I'm participating in a fellowship in CEO Action for Racial Equity.
Okay.
But I am an educational leader. And I think that when you look at what advice would I give, first of all, go back to finding yourself. Who are you as a person? What are those things that you don't waver on? And I think that's the start. It took me a while to figure it out. And I think any leader who is honest with themselves and honest with people that are trying to lead, you got to know that you're constantly growing. You've got to admit that you don't know everything, and be willing to surround yourself with people who in some cases may know more than you. I think that when you have trust as well, and you can establish trust, you can be more vulnerable. And that allows for you to say, hey, I don't know. For someone else to be able to say, I don't know. And then for us to work together to figure it out. I think that also as an aspiring leader, don't run away from establishing quality relationships at every level. You don't know, you spoke through the terms of politics. I just call them relationships. You never know when you're gonna need them. I'll quote one thing, and then definitely feel free to reach out and we can connect offline. But I firmly believe at the core of the Earth's axis, are relationships. And schools, district offices, whatever they may be, education is a people's business. So if you can establish quality relationships, do right by people, which mainly are the kids. If you can do that, treat people well, 9 times out of 10, you'll get that back. And so what that means is that you'll get opportunities you probably don't deserve because of the way you're treating people. But it will also mean that when you're thinking about branding, if you do it right, you treat people right, and you treat children right, 9 times out of 10, you'll get the benefit of the doubt when things are not going as well as you want them to. So that's my advice.
I understand. I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
All things that you can connect back to More Than a Notion.
Most definitely. Most definitely. I didn't mean to cut you off, Miss Youngblood. I'm sorry.
And that's who I'm going to you right now, Ms. Youngblood. If you can give us those that nugget that you would share with your younger self as an early educator.
Note to my younger self as an educator would be know your strengths walking in. Know if you're organized. Know your strengths and identify your weaknesses quick. Because if you don't, you're going to be in denial and it's going to linger on and cause later issues. So for me, my younger self is know what you're strong in, grow that, and identify what you're weak in, and be around, connect with people who can help you in that weakness. If you're not good in a skill, if you're not a people's person, get around someone who's a people's person. If you're into numbers and you're into data, and your other co-partner isn't, it's kind of like that. It's a community. It's partner. Yeah. It's knowing your strengths and being able to say, okay, I'm good at data. You can put it all in front of me and I analyze it all day and I can come up with a plan. That's your strength. Sure. My weakness is I don't like to talk to nobody. So it's like, I know you don't like data. So it's like, we're a partner. Don't expect for yourself to do everything.
I echo those sentiments. Miss Youngblood knows I don't like data, and I give it to her. So no, she's not lying. No, firsthand experience, and she know I love people. So hey, that's how she's speaking to something we literally do every day. Every day.
And it works because it's like a partnership. It's like if you are good at everything, you don't need a partner. That's not the design of our well-being, our humanity. We're supposed to need other people. So I don't want to be a person that's walking the room and like, I don't need nobody. You're at a deficit already. You're not going to grow. And as the book speaks, you want to be able to grow, know your deficits, and grow the people around you. So for me, it will be know what I'm strong in and know what I'm weak in and get around people who can help me in my weaknesses.
Well, this is bringing segment 2 with our expiring leaders to a close. I want to thank you all. Thank Brother Van Phillips Jr., Tamisha Brown, and Maisha Baker Youngblood. Thank you all for joining us and giving us your insight and making the connections to More Than a Notion. So
thank you for having me. Pleasure's mine. Yeah. Pleasure's all mine.
Thank you all. And hopefully, if need be, we can connect offline, Brother Van, if you need to.
Most definitely. Most definitely.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Bye.
At this time, we want to remind everyone that you can go to our website with passiondrivenleadership.org. Also want to remind you, if you go to the website, that we're going to be looking at those people who have liked and shared the information tonight, and we'll be giving away 1 free book. If you can, add your email address at the website, subscribe, add your email address. That will put you in the drawing for a free book tonight. Also want to thank everyone, our participants, for sharing their knowledge, and also want to highlight a few other people who have chosen to join us tonight. I see we have Laverne Muhammad from Montreal, Quebec, Canada. Looking at a few more. Anthony Kimball, watching for the transformation of the students. Thank you, Brother Kimball. Shalita Cannon Hoey says she's interested in chapter 6. Timothy Rose, we're looking at the quote saying, I love the idea that every day we have opportunity to change a child's trajectory. I think that is key. At this time, we're going to go to Eddie Spencer for a few more minutes of live music. Thank you. Good evening and welcome back to our virtual book launch of More Than a Notion, a journey in educational leadership in the age of accountability by Dr. Tyrone Burton. In segment 3, we're going to be having guests that'll be representing central office positions throughout a few districts. First, we'll have Dr. Marvin Rainey, who is a district executive master teacher in Caddo Parish. Dr. Nate Dudley, field support liaison for the 27th district in the Bronx, New York. And Dr. Telois Graham, assistant superintendent from Cedar Hill, Texas. Glad to have you all on with us this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
And glad you're here.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna jump right in. First, starting with just a question around sharing with the audience. What are those maybe one or two things that really stuck out to you or that you connected with from the book? And I'll start with you, Mr. Graham.
Good evening to everyone. Definitely enjoyed the book written by Dr. Burton. But the chapter that resonated with me the most is chapter 4. And chapter 4 is Beyond Transformation. One of the things that it talked about, of course, is retaining and recruiting our teachers. Our teachers are the most important people on our campuses and in our educational system. And in order for us to ensure that we have a system that's growing and we're doing the best for our children, we have to make sure that we're growing our teachers. And we have to make sure that teachers are staying and they're enjoying what they're doing. We have to, as Dr. Burton talked about, being a passion-driven leader, instead of us leading by our position, we must lead by our passion. And that's something that he talked about in this particular section. He talked about a teacher being effective, but also in order for them to be effective, we must grow them by our communication with them. And we must make them feel empowered and create that belonging in this particular school system. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but retaining and recruiting teachers is definitely the most important thing that I saw in this particular chapter.
Thank you, Brother Graham. I'm going to definitely come back to you around that communication because I think that is key. Next, we'll turn to Dr. Dudley. If you will share what resonated with you the most.
Well, good evening, and thank you, everyone, for having me. Thank you, Dr. Burton, for having me. Great to be with everyone on here, especially principals, aspiring leaders, and now district leaders. I'm going to start with a quote that I really like. Passion-driven leaders possess the skill and the will. Of course, you know, Dr. Burton has to rhyme, but passion-driven leaders possess the skill and the will to bring about lasting, sustainable changes. And I think that we as district leaders, we like to see leaders in schools and obviously superintendents in districts that are thinking about how do you create sustainable change. And there's a lot of pieces that have to be in place for schools to be in a kind of a continuous improvement model. But I really believe that Dr. Burton's book touches on so many of those aspects that need to be in place in order to create sustainable change. And I'm looking forward to speaking about some of those.
Thank you very much. Now we'll turn to you, Dr. Rainey. Please give us some insight into what kind of caught your attention and stood out to you from the book.
Yes, sir. Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Burton, for having me on the platform on tonight. Chapter 2 was the piece that really stood out to me, finding and refining that effective leadership. And so in there, he talks about there's not a crisis in education. There's a crisis in educational leadership. And so for me, that just stood out because we need district leaders as well as school leaders who truly believe in the kids they're making decisions about. And then another piece in that chapter talked about failure isn't fatal, but failing to change might be. And that piece really hit home when I think about a district leader, because the magic normally starts with us and then it trickles down into the school. And so if we're not changing and growing our practices, then it's going to trickle down and it's going to be the same thing in the school at the school level. So those two pieces definitely stood out to me.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm going to ask all of you all to kind of comment on this next question, but I'll start with you, Mr. Graham. You mentioned that communication is key. And one of the things that Dr. Burton mentioned, something that we don't often see when people talk about communication and ask about your communication skills. he mentioned about being active listeners, being a good listener as a key communication skill. How does that come into play in your role at the at central office?
Thank you for that question, Dr. Daniel. In my position now, of course, we're actively seeking teachers to provide, of course, the best teachers for our campuses. I deal with teachers in many aspects. I deal with grievances through teachers and other faculty members. I deal with teachers, of course, during interviewing. And one of the things that I have to do when a teacher comes with a grievance about a problem that happened on that campus is, first of all, listen to what they're saying, and not just with the words, but also waiting and watching their body language. Of course, watching how they're moving and going beyond what they're actually saying to try to read in what's happening there. Because sometimes a teacher will not express everything that they want. Either they don't know how to express it, or they're afraid to express those particular things. And you must be able to get that out of those conversations that you're having with them. But in turn, if I do have a teacher that is disgruntled about a certain situation that happened in that campus or in the district, now I must also motivate them through the words that they said as well, because that teacher is going back into that classroom. You know, we can't just throw our teachers away nowadays. We don't have this great bench of teachers that are there and hey, we can just get rid of them at all times. We must provide that professional development for them that's going to allow them to grow and prosper and be what's best for our teachers. So we listen to them, we watch them, and we go back and we motivate them to be better.
You touched on something that I think that kind of highlights another point that Dr. Burton mentioned, and that's being able to lead because you know who you're leading, and giving them the right type of support so they can be successful. Even if there's been a mishaps, even if there's been a mistake, even if there's been a grievance, how do I get you back on track?
That's right.
And in order to do that, I got to know who you are, and I got to find the best way to motivate you. So I think that's a great point. Dr. Rainey, would you like to chime in on that at all, about how effective communication works in your space?
You're on mute, sorry.
Sorry about that. In my space, communication is so important. I work with 13 leadership team. That's 13 different principals, 13 different leader capacities. And so communication is so important in my role, because one, it's not a one-size-fits-all model. I have to listen in order to coach. And so with that being said, is I have to effectively be an effective communicator, especially if we'll put implement systems and structures across the board. I have to make sure that I can listen and I'm hearing them and hearing what works for their school. But number two, I'm effectively communicating at the district level on the big initiatives and the big parts of it. So one, with that communication piece, I always say is something has to be sent and received. And so one, I have to listen to receive so that I can send something back.
Great point. Great point. Dr. Dudley, would you like to share anything on that piece?
Sure. Well, I think we've all kind of, lived through or survived the pandemic, and a lot of guidance coming down from the top, at least in my system, in the New York City public education system, was sometimes amorphous. And so it kind of, because it was not clear guidance, and I think that everybody's been looking for clarity, a lot of the decision-making fell at the school level. Or, the district would try to explain it because the city didn't explain it very well. And then the principal would have to make the call. And I think that kind of begs the question, or at least begs the answer. And the answer is clarity of expectation and being clear in what you expect, I believe, is 70% of education. The other 30% is assessment and follow-up and then reteaching, right? But if teachers are clear with their kids, right, they know what they're supposed to do, you can actually then assess it. If principals are clear with their teachers, clarity of expectation, then you know what to expect. The teachers know what to expect and what's expected of them in the classroom. If district leaders the same way, we have to be clear with principals what the priorities are in the district, how we expect to support you, and how we expect to get there. It's all about clarity of expectation.
And I think that when you think about clarity of expectations, you're talking about great communication. And we know that in the absence of good communication, people assume, and that's not going to help any of us move students and get them to the next level. So, Dr. Dudley, want to come back to you. You spoke about the chapter that resonated with you. Do you want to go a little deeper on that?
Sure. Dr. Burton talks about sustainable changes, right? Making sustainable changes. And, like he makes a lot, there's a lot of references to the different frames that you need to have as a leader, thinking about things like the 10-year study and what's important. But I think what really it comes down to what's important in order to make sustainable changes, it is what you mentioned before, Dr. Daniel. It's about relationships. It's about trust. It's about knowing your students well. It's about having relationships with your teachers, knowing who they are, meeting them where they are so that they can meet the students where they are, right? It's about building those relationships in order to create the teacher teams that are going to be able to drive the continuous improvement. It's about identifying leaders, right? Capacity building, as Dr. Burton discusses. It's about identifying those leaders that can run those teacher teams and think about that data, identify that problem of practice, put in a strategy to try to address it, come back around and see if that strategy worked when you look at student work. How do you create those systems with your teachers? It's based on coming from the relationships first, then you build your teams and you build your leadership capacity in your building.
Quick question for Dr. Rainey and for Mr. Graham. Dr. Burton talks about stress and dealing with stress. Both of you all three of you all have principal experience. How do you deal with the stress at the district level? I know it's different from what you saw at the principal level, but how do you deal with it at the district level? And how is it different? I think it's different, but how can you explain the difference between the principal level stress and the district office stress? We'll start with you, Brother Graham.
Now, are you referring to stress on me or stress on or teachers saying that they're stressed?
No, it's stress on you.
Okay. And I'll say that I'm a person that, because I love my job, the stress is about not achieving goals or not achieving to the level that I want to achieve. It's not about doing my job. It's not about me coming to work and woe is me, I have to get up every morning and we have all these different issues that are happening. I think about what will happen if I'm not successful, and I'll lose a child if I'm not successful. So it goes back to passion-driven leadership, as Dr. Burton talks about so eloquently. We have to be passionate about what we do each and every day, because I know that student that's not getting the proper education or that's not receiving that social emotional learning or something in that day may not have eaten that morning, may not have received all the love he needs at home, and may turn out and do something else if I don't provide the best instruction for that principal or that teacher to give to that student. So I'm all about achieving goals. And when I get stressed, is because I know that I didn't accomplish something for that student.
Great point. Taking it back to why we do the work. And I think Dr. Burton mentions that the students have to guide our work. Brother Rainey, will you share or would like to share anything on that point?
Sure. I want to make sure I'm unmuted. You guys can hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. But yeah, as T said, I'm truly a passion driven leader, and so I truly operate at my highest potential in my passion. And so when I think about the district level and the school level, man, it's a big difference. At the school level, you pretty much in control of some things, and you can kind of call some shots on the thing. But at the district level, you working with so many different departments, and it's such a complex organization. And so when I think about the district level stress, with me, it's about the political side of it brings stress on. But when that happens is I do go back to my passion. My passion is growing teachers and leaders. And so therefore, how I deal with it, I book myself into schools. So I get into schools where I can truly make impact, and I don't worry about those things that I cannot control.
So a little serenity prayer.
Yes.
A little serenity prayer.
Yes.
Well, want to comment on one thing on both the comments that you all made. It's just trying to make sure that your I seem like you start to have a little stress, Brother Graham, when you're not meeting your mark, the goals that you established for yourself or the superintendents established. And I think that all of us want to make sure that our passion, our effort lines up with our passion, so that we feel at the end of the day, I've done all I can do to serve the people I'm supposed to serve. Dr. Dudley, I was told that you had some charter school experience.
No, actually.
Okay.
I'm not on the charter side, but
okay.
I can speak. I want to speak to the stress piece though, just real quick.
Well, let's go in. Go ahead.
Okay. I feel like, there's another Dr. Burton quote that I wanted to pull out. He says it's nice and short. It's time to defy standardization. And when I think about that, I think about, okay, I have 27 schools that I'm working with in the Bronx, in the South Bronx, New York. And 16 of them have a state designation because the students have not done as well as the state thinks they should have done on standardized tests, right? And, Dr. Burton's quote speaks to that. So there's a lot of pressure, and I work with a lot of those 16 schools that have those state meetings and the state person looking over their shoulder. The pressure is coming from the standardization, right? And kind of saying to the teachers, well, actually, we want you to be creative in the classroom. We want you to actually think outside the box. We need you to create culturally relevant lessons, culturally relevant and historical unit plans. But the teacher comes back and says, but I got to do this curriculum that, the state wants me to do, because if I don't do that, they're going to fail the Regents exams. And guess what? We're going to be on the list next year. So there's a lot of stress in terms of actually creating an innovative classroom environment, culturally relevant, and getting the kids to kind of hit their marks as far as the state system is concerned. And that's why I like to think about that quote. It's time to defy standardization. And then how do we implement that in different ways?
Okay. So we're coming to a close on this segment. But I have one other question I want you all to kind of think about. And it goes back to the stress. But I'm thinking now of the stress of the schools, or the stress of the leaders, or stress of the teachers. What in a central office capacity do you do to help people overcome stress? Not just for you personally, but what do you do? What practices do you demonstrate for the people that you are serving and supporting? And we can start with you, Dr. Rainey.
Okay. Well, with me, to help my team, because again, as Doc just mentioned about those schools who are under that under those mandates for not performing, they are very stressed. Well, especially in ours in the state of Louisiana, it's called CRUR. They have a lot of mandates, a lot of changes, a lot of requirements they must do. And so when I think about especially in this pandemic, number one, I think I heard it earlier, the word grace. That's been our word for the whole school year. It's showing them grace, and not loving them to failure, but still showing grace and holding them accountable. But my thing is to kind of alleviate a lot of that stress on them. I become a true lens of authentic support. So when I go out, I'm coming just to support you to make this better. So whatever I can take off your plate to help you think through, so there can be a less stress on you. That's what I'm here for, and that's truly how we've gotten through this year in my 14 schools. Hey, I'm just here for support. How can I support you? And it's worked. I mean, they haven't been stressed as normal because they know they got a true lifeline of support right there in the building with them.
A little grace with accountability, or a little accountability with some grace. Yeah, I hear you, and doing a little discipline with dignity, still leaving people with their dignity, yes. So you can continue to grow them.
Yes.
So great point. Mr. Graham, would you like to speak to that?
So I'll take one of the quotes that Dr. Burton said. He said, we may not be able to change the way the system is structured, but we can elect passion leaders who can. And simply put, a leader makes a big difference into what happens on that campus. I've heard over and over this year, because of all the changes that Dr. Nate talked about, as far as information we get from the state. This year, we pass it down to principals at the last minute. Principals had to give it to teachers at the last minute. Teachers are teaching both virtual and in person. All these other changes that are happening so fast. And you heard that word stress over and over and over again. Well, there were some campuses where you heard that word stress at the beginning of the year, but it waned throughout the semester because of what that principal was doing. And he was looking at some of those motivation factors that allow a teacher to feel less stress. He was ensuring that although we had these different changes, he was recognizing them for their accomplishments. He was still giving them responsibility. He was allowing them to be empowered, and he was still ensuring that there was personal growth there, even though there were changes. He was also looking at the working conditions and of course, looking at some of the times that he was spending with that particular teacher. But instead of him just directing, he was motivating and inspiring those teachers, and those teachers felt less stressed because of it. And that's what it takes. It takes a great leader, again, a passion-driven leader that's focused on directing and supporting his staff to ensure that they grow. And that will take away some of the stress.
So, Dr. Dudley, you're going to close us out. If you could close us out for a minute. And
sure.
Mr. Graham, I'm going to comment on what you shared after Dr. Dudley.
Thank you. Well, you asked, what can we do as district leaders in terms of relieving some stress? A minute for mindfulness. We have tried to do a minute for mindfulness at the beginning of every class. We do that in our principals meetings. We do it in our assistant principals meetings. We do it in our teachers meetings. We always lead the meetings with a minute for mindfulness. You take those breaths, you work on your breathing exercises, right? We're teaching students how to do that as well. That's one of the things I think that the pandemic has helped us think about. We set up principals in smaller groups, in smaller professional learning communities, PLCs, to vet with each other, to support each other in smaller groups, not just a big 27-person meeting. We shared healthy recipes with each other in order to eat better, eat more healthy, if we're going to be cooped up at home, and then going back and doing the blended thing in the school. And more than anything else, we provide resources and we listen. I think in the end, what this has shown us, and what I think Dr. Burton's book talks about better than anything else, is it's not about compliance, it's about compassion.
Hey, I think you both, well, all three of you all have hit on some key points, and a couple of things that I want to go back to as we close out this segment. Dudley, you just mentioned it's not about compliance, it's about compassion. And I think when you can give compassion, compliance changes to commitment. Mm-hmm. And that's how you build that culture and that team that Dr. Burton is talking about when he references the work they did at Cherokee Park. Also want to add just a quick comment on what Mr. Graham stated. And as he's talking about doing these things to ease the stress of the teachers with all this whole year of change that we've had to experience. I think the key is, and this is what Dr. Burton speaks about, is about making emotional deposits. Mm-hmm. You got to make emotional deposits, because with all the changes, eventually you're going to have to make a withdrawal. That's right. And it hurts when there's nothing in the emotional bank account and you go to pull something out. So, gentlemen, I want to thank you all for sharing your insight, connecting with the book, More Than a Notion. These are our representatives from the central office. Dr. Marvin Rainey, Dr. Nate Dudley, Mr. Telois Graham. Want to thank you all for joining us this evening, and this will close out our segment, and want to encourage everyone to take an opportunity to like what's going on tonight, the book launch, share it, go to Amazon and purchase the book, More Than a Notion, and just want to ask that you will remain with us as we turn to Mr. Eddie Spencer for some live music before our fourth segment of the night. Good evening and welcome back to the virtual book launch of More Than a Notion by Dr. Tyrone Burton. In the fourth segment of our virtual book launch, we're going to have representatives from different colleges as well as educational companies. We have with us Dr. Joanne Hood, who has a pre-recorded segment for us, Dr. Carlos Lee. And Dr. Joanne Hood is from Louisiana Tech. She's an assistant professor of curriculum and instructional leadership. Also, Dr. Carlos Lee, assistant professor of educational professional practice from LSU. Both of them have a pre-recorded segment for us. And live with us, Dr. Cheryl Mansfield-Inslee, associate professor and interim department head of education at Grambling State University, where everybody is somebody. Also, Dr. Nicole Houston Johnson, Chief of Partnership and Opportunities for the Rensselaerville Institute out of Albany, New York. So first, before we get started with our panelists that are live with us, we're going to listen to the comments from Dr. Joanne Hood. And after Dr. Joanne Hood, we'll hear the comments from Dr. Carlos Lee. After that, we'll come back to Dr. Inslee and Dr. Johnson and engage in a conversation around More Than a Notion.
Hello and good evening. My name is Dr. Joanne Hood and I am an assistant professor at Louisiana Tech University in Ruston, Louisiana. I am very honored to be with you this evening to share with you some thoughts and ideas I had after reading Dr. Tyrone Burton's book, Being the Brand. When I read Chapter 3, The Branding Process, You Are the Brand, in Dr. Burton's book, it really spoke to me. Having spent 10 years as a principal of a Title I school, I could identify with the information shared in this chapter. I would love to spend some time this evening and share with you some of the key points that Dr. Burton made and how they played a role in my career as a school leader and now as a university professor. Dr. Burton states that as a school principal, you are the brand for your school, the image or the face of the school. The leader's message, our message, must be the vision that will pave the way to the school's success. A school cannot be successful or transformed without a vision, without a message. And this must originate with the principal. Simply put, the parents and students see you out in the community and they identify you with your school. How you handle yourself, how you react to situations, how you treat your school family. Dr. Burton shared that if you want your school to change, you must be the change you want to see in others. That's powerful. Having spent 10 years at an inner city, low-performing, low socioeconomic school, I can't agree with this anymore. I had to remind myself daily that I was the brand and that all the stakeholders, the students, the parents, the teachers, the community members, they were looking at me to see what my vision was for the school. Was I positive when things were hard? If I have to be honest, I was very far from perfect. But as Dr. Burton shared, the school leader has to model what they want their teachers to do. Now, in my current role as the program coordinator of the Masters of Educational Leadership program in the College of Education, I get to help prepare our future school leaders. Many points that are made in this chapter are key concepts that need to be shared with our prospective school principals. Chapter 3 describes doing some simple things to help transform your school, like saying good morning or thank you, even when you don't feel like it. Greeting students and parents in front of the school at the beginning and the end of the day. Publicly recognizing stakeholders for investing in your school. and conveying to staff that you value their time by not holding unnecessary meetings. Dr. Burton does a tremendous job of including some practical but effective strategies in this chapter. These strategies will definitely be shared with the students in my graduate courses. One of the first things that any school leader new to a school must do is craft their vision so that it can be communicated with the school family. Dr. Burton outlines the qualities of a good message and provides a list of what should be included. How I wish I had had this information all those years ago when I first entered my very first principalship. But now, I'm in a position where I can share this information with my students and help to make their transition into a leadership position that much easier. If you are a school leader and your school is not moving in the right direction, I highly suggest that you look at this chapter and reflect upon your journey. If you're a university or a college professor, I recommend that you review the content of this chapter and share it with your students. Our future school leaders would most definitely benefit from this knowledge. Great job, Tyrone. This book is definitely a great contribution to the educational world, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to share with you. Good night. Hello.
Welcome back. Want to make sure that I introduce Dr. Carlos Lee. He could not be with us live, so he has a pre-recorded comments as well. So we'll hear him, and then we'll move to our panelists that are live with us. So now we'll have Dr. Carlos Lee.
Greetings, everyone. I hope that tonight finds you all well and in good spirit. My name is Carlos Lee, and I am employed at Louisiana State University as Assistant Professor of Educational Leadership, where I am directly responsible for the Masters of Education and Certificate of Education Specialist programs in Educational Leadership as the coordinator of each program. In this role, I provide direct instruction, mentoring, advising, and internship supervision to elementary and secondary educational leadership students, both present and former. With that being said, More Than a Notion will be added to my normal textbook rotation. That's how impressed I am with this piece of work by Dr. Tyrone Burton. As with Dr. Burton's first book, The Reframing of American Education, this book is full of wisdom and insight. In my opinion, Dr. Burton showed that he is tuned into the needs of today's leaders by the way he articulates this in his new book and the way he makes complex and abstract ideas practical and easy to understand. And it really shines in this particular book. Dr. Burton's deep insight into organizational change is found in the section Solutions Anyone Can Take Educational Leaders to New Heights of Motivation and Performance. Within a diverse world, many of the core elements and themes in More Than a Notion, such as gaps, understanding accountability, era versus era, underlining issues in Common Core, and evidence-based learning, will serve leaders who strive to stand apart from the crowd. As I stated earlier, I coordinate both MED and EDS programs in educational leadership at LSU, and when I choose books and publications, I have to make sure that they do an adequate job of supporting the PEASL, which is the Professional Standards of Educational Leaders, and NELP, which is the National Educational Leadership Preparation Standards. Both sets of standards are used for principal preparation programs and also used to gauge program effectiveness and CAPE and SACS accountability. More Than a Notion gives support to multiple standards, such as NELP Standard 1, which is Mission, Vision, and Improvement, Standard 3, which is Equity, Inclusiveness, and Cultural Responsiveness, and also Standard 7, which is Building Professional Capacity, just to name a few. To Dr. Burton, my friend, I congratulate you for another job well done. I really wish that I could have been there on tonight's call, but please know that I support you 120%, sir, and I am there with you in spirit. I ask that God continue to bless you and everyone there with you tonight, and I definitely am awaiting your next endeavor. Thank you all, and have a great night.
Welcome back. I hope that you all were able to follow Dr. Lee and Dr. Hood as they shared their comments. And now we're going to turn to Dr. Cheryl Mansfield Inslee, Interim Department Head of Education at Grambling State University, and Dr. Nicole Houston Johnson. Glad that you all were able to join us. Thank you for joining us this evening. Please say something to make sure that we can hear you.
Thank you.
Well,
thank you for having us tonight.
Thank you all both. Now we're going to start just like we've started with the previous segments, and knowing that everyone will speak from their own experiences. But wanted to see, as you're looking at it from the college professor, Dr. Inslee, and Dr. Johnson, as you're looking at it from the educational company, what one or two things that really stood out to you from the book More Than a Notion? And we'll start with you, Dr. Inslee.
Okay, great. Again, thank you for having me here tonight. I want to start off by saying that I grew up also hearing that term, that things are more than a notion. And it means, even at that time, that you have to have that passion and do things that take more than a notion, more than that the ordinary person probably could not do. And I must agree that educating our students is more than a notion. When you talk about what really resonated with me, I want to say that we have the obligation of leveling the playing field for all students. But so a lot in the book resonated with me, but I think that what transitions all segments of education is that we all have that obligation to level the playing field. From pre-K through college, there's things that need to be leveled. And in the book, he said that we must be intentional in repairing the breach between the have and the have-nots. And the have and the have-nots, they may appear in different forms, but all children of all levels have a right to a quality education. And at the university level, what comes to mind is the selective admissions. At some universities, they have selective admissions, but here at Grambling State University, it's part of our HBCU goal to accept those students where they are and take them where they need to be. So we have to be very intentional in those supports that we provide and other things that we do so that we can breach the gap between the have and the have-not. Children of all levels have that right, and we must make those decisions that are best for students at all times.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Johnson, what connected with you from the text?
Well, chapter 7 really connected with me. Chapter 7 is about a call to action. Dr. Burton began with a personal narrative about how his mom, how she used her faith to persevere through adversity while pursuing a higher education. And it's because of women like her that it reminds me of, as a young leader, that I stand on the shoulders of women like her. And he shared a song that she would sing. And when he finally looked at the words of the song, how much it actually touched and impacted him through his journey. And so as a young school leader, I can often think about times when, as leading in middle school, in an area that was not used to diversity, that I would always fall back on a song that my mother used to sing to me as a small child. And it was just, "This little light of mine, I gotta let it shine." So in chapter 7, he asked us, are we willing to heed the call to action? He also asked, will you be named as someone who stood for a principle? And so in the work that I currently do at the Rensselaerville Institute, I say yes to the calling that he asked us, are we willing to do? Because I constantly push myself to have courage to speak up for big and even small moments when there's areas to really ensure that all children have quality teaching and learning and access to more opportunities. Or in the work that we do, making sure that we commit to building capacity in future and aspiring leaders in the schools that we work in.
You definitely hit some key points there when you mentioned that you are standing on the giants. And I think we all are standing on the shoulders of giants and those who laid the groundwork for us. And I think you mentioned Dr. Burton mentioning his mom and having that song. I think it was the movie I'm Gonna Get You Sucker, where he says every hero has the theme song.
Right.
And some of it might not be a theme song. It's that song that anchors you to keep you going. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what a lot of leaders have. We have that song or that poem or that thought that anchors us and keeps us strong when things get tough. So absolutely. I think that's key. Wanted to go in a little deeper. Mm-hmm. And when you think about, and this is for you, Dr. Johnson, when you think about that call to action, mm-hmm. and you think about what that looks like in your work as you're trying to coach or lead or support other leaders?
Well, in a lot of ways, it's about courage. Leaders have to have the courage to really stand up to the many challenges that they face. It's easy just to do the minimum. But one thing Dr. Burton points out in chapter 7 is that we need to be the greatest that we can be, because our profession needs us to be that person. And that, in the work that we do with school leaders, we're constantly pushing them to be their best person and to really look at what their strengths are and to use those strengths to have a sustainable change. But we also ask them to look at the areas that they're not as strong and how can they improve themselves in those areas, or find team members that have strength in those areas, such that they're able to have sustainable change so our children can truly have a better quality of education.
Thank you. Dr. Inslee, in your work in preparing students to go into the field of education and to possibly lead, what do you share with them about the people that they're going to have to work with and learning and being willing to adjust to people? What are some of the things that you all are sharing at GSU?
Okay. And that is definitely one thing that we share, that they have to be willing and working with people. And it's not just about the students, it's about the whole organization. And so in the book, I kind of think about how he talked about those tests that you can take so that you can learn yourself, because the students have to know themselves so that they can improve and grow, and so that they can impact student growth. And also, so I think taking those assessments, like they talked about the true colors, so that you're able to lead and you're able to know your strengths. And not only that, so that you can know other strengths, and so that you know how to work well with others, because different people of different colors by these tests, they interact differently. And so the book really talks about that, about how we must first know ourselves and know our strengths, our weaknesses, how we can improve. And then we're able to also know others and how we work well with others as well. So in the department, we talk about skills that students need to be successful, and the disposition is one of those three skills that are needed. So we talk about the knowledge, the skills, and the dispositions that are needed to be a successful teacher. And so it is important, and we talk about it and we measure it at 3 different points in their matriculation, so we can ensure that they're growing and that they're realizing the importance and the impact that their disposition and the way that they handle things and that the way they operate will impact the total organization.
I think that's a great segue for me to ask you, Ms. Dr. Johnson. Mm-hmm. Dr. Burton speaks about being the brand and the branding process in chapter 3 of More Than a Notion. And I listened to Dr. Inslee's statements about how they are talking to the students about disposition. How are you able to share with leaders in the schools that you work with about how they communicate their brand and how they promote their brand or do things to protect it?
Well, we always when we work with our school leaders, we always say your message is what you say, but your brand is what you do. So I always, we just challenge them to, if you say you're going to do something, make sure that you're doing that, because people hear you, but they watch your actions more than anything. So, and that's more than a notion when working with school leaders.
Yes. But when you talk about branding, I almost have to come in here because at Grambling State University, branding is very important, the place where everybody is somebody. So we have a clear sense of branding and work to be sure that it shows in all of our interactions. And so just like she just said, not just say it, but we have to walk the walk every day and show the students that we're here to level that playing field for you, because here at Grambling State University, everybody is somebody, and we're going to do what it takes to be sure that you are successful and that you are able to go out and be a caring and competent teacher. At DeSoto High School, where I previously served as the principal for 6 years, we started a branding campaign, which said, I am DeSoto, where every student took accountability for their own actions. And every day we started the morning off by them saying, hey, I am DeSoto. My words and actions impact DeSoto every day. It impacts the brand, and impacts what happens, it impacts what people think of the school, how I act and how I behave. So I am DeSoto. So those are ways that at the college level and the high school level where branding has come to play. And as the students thought more about that and said it more, sometimes they'd say it jokingly, but we even liked it when they said it jokingly, because we knew that they were hearing it, that I am DeSoto. And eventually they realized that, hey, if the perception of the school is to change, then it has to start with me.
I think
at the Rensselaerville Institute, our message is,
go ahead.
We increase life chances for children through education and community. So every project that we take on, it is to impact young people in their educational journey, as well as the communities in which they live in. And so every decision that we make stands behind that message.
And that means you all are living that. If you do that with everything, you're having to live it. And Dr. Inslee, I want to share with you that when you mentioned that mission about DeSoto, in two of the schools in which I've served as school leaders, and we thinking about our brand, we started our mission and our motto with I am whatever the school name was, and that we are one family, and we will live, breathe, and speak. And it all was around getting those students to buy in to the fact that they were the change. We were investing in them so that they could be the change. I wanted to share that when you mentioned that. I was like, oh, that rang a bell. But it was getting them to understand that they were the change. I'll add one other comment before I go to the next question. I was listening to a interview with T.D. Jakes, and he made the statement that we are the people that we're waiting on.
Yeah.
And I think when we talk about branding and we talk about leadership, it's being the example that we want people to see, but we also want the students to be. We want to be who they are looking for as an example. And we can't expect anyone to come to the school or come to the college to bring in change that we're not willing to lead and guide ourselves. So just wanted to share that. One other thing, I know we're doing pretty good. I think we have a few more minutes. Just one or two questions. One more question specifically. What are you all's thoughts when Dr. Burton speaks about transformational leadership and servant leadership? What are you all's thoughts on how that comes to play or how that plays out in your particular role or an environment in which you work? And what does that look like? And we can start with you, Dr. Inslee.
Yeah, that's one thing I've discovered. I've been an administrator and worked pre-K through college, but that is the one consistent piece, that we have to be servant leaders. We have to be here with a purpose, and the purpose has to be centered around the students. All decisions have to be made in the best interest of the students and not the adults. And when we look at it and talk about a win-win situation, and that's not a hard thing to do, but that transformative leadership is very important. It starts with your passion, and it makes me think about a quote that he said in the book, that you have to be able and ready to transform. And if leaders do not want to stand up for children, then they should sit down and let others take the reins. That really, really stood out to me, because we have to be courageous. We have to do what's right for students, even when we are faced with obstacles and those who would like to do other things. And if we're going to transform the systems that we're in so that they are student-centered, then we have to be willing to stand up for children. And if not, we need to move out of the way and let someone else take the reins.
I would
Dr.
say,
Johnson, go ahead.
In my experience, that the best leaders were great servants first. I always think back to when I became an assistant principal, and I was very young, and I had a lot of things that I thought the current principal could have possibly done differently. I had a conversation with my grandmother, and she said to me, she said, "What's your title again?" And I said, "Assistant principal." She said, "Well, that's it. You're there to assist the principal. When you become a principal of your own campus, you're going to expect for your assistant principal to follow what you decide is correct. So right now, just stay in your role." And so one thing that has stayed with me is that in serving others and meeting the needs of those that are our clients in the business that we do in transformational leadership through the Rensselaerville Institute, is that the more we serve and help them, the better results that children receive. So everything that we do is to help build capacity in teachers, build capacity in leaders. And when you spoke of the quote around change, I love the quote that say, "Be the change that you want to see in the world." So don't wait for someone else. Change begins with each one of us.
I think that is key. And before we close out, I wanted to come in on one thing similar to what your grandmother said about, being the assistant principal. I think so often as leaders, we put leaders under the microscope, and it's easy to highlight what their leadership is or is not. But rarely do we put our followership under the microscope and determine if we're doing what we're supposed to do as an assistant principal, or even as a principal, or in any role.
Yeah.
So I think that one of the things that we have to continue to stress as we influence leaders is about serving, thinking about ways they can make their supervisor look good by doing the work that they do.
Yeah.
So ladies, I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. It has been great to hear your thoughts on the things that resonated with you from More Than a Notion.
Waiting for Dr. Burton to sign my book.
And me too. But thank you both for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
It's been our pleasure. At this time, we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to transition over to a closer with Dr. Burton.
What a pleasure to endorse Dr. Tyrone Burton on his second book, More Than a Notion, A Journey into Educational Leadership in the Time of Accountability. I have heard Dr. Burton use that term, more than a notion, more than once, twice, and so many times when dealing with student discipline, when recruiting teachers to his school, regardless of the student's zip code, having him to say that it's more than a notion, Diane. I have to make sure that in this age of accountability that I have the best teachers, and if I have a struggling teacher, I'm going to coach them up. And that's what this book does. It is for principals, it's for educators who are looking for that blueprint, that roadmap into tapping into educational success for all children. Thank you. What a pleasure to endorse Dr. Tyrone Burton.
Welcome back to the virtual book launch, More Than a Notion by Dr. Tyrone Burton. Dr. Burton, I want to thank you for allowing me to be a part of this event. It's been a joy to connect with educators, leaders, aspiring leaders, about the work that you put in. That I think it's truly a roadmap. It's a template that leaders can use, those that support leaders, as well as those that are aspiring to be leaders. I think it's something they can use. We're going to ask you a few questions before we just really dive in and encourage everyone to go out and purchase the book. First, you started the book talking about your mother and the thought of more than a notion. But what do you think your mother would be, is she looking down right now? What do you think she's saying about her son, Tyrone, Dr. Tyrone Burton?
You know, first of all, let me thank you for being here. We're very fortunate to have someone like you that speaks truth to power and who's in a position to do great things. And you're busy every day, so thank you for coming and sharing with us. And thank you, everyone, for participating tonight. You know, today, I was talking to my wife about the same thing, about what my mama would say. You know, she raised two boys, my brother and I, single parent. In fact, by today's standards, we'd be considered home because we were raised in the home with our grandparents. So it was the three of us in there. And she raised my brother and I. And she always taught us to hold to those values that made us good citizens: integrity, trustworthy, honesty, and to be true to ourselves. And she always taught us that if we believed something and conceived it, then we could achieve anything. So we thought we could conquer the world. But she also was very transparent about the struggles she went through. As a first grade teacher, she taught first grade for 29 and a half years. And I saw her go through those struggles. And on her lowest point, she would always say, it's more than a notion. And I remember her going through those things that she taught. And I remember the lessons she taught me. And those are the things that carried me through graduate school, postgraduate school, and indeed leading schools, believing that I could do those things that seemed impossible. So if she were looking down here now, I think she'd be pleased that I was first honest with myself and that I believed the concept, I conceived it, and I achieved it, not by myself, but because I believe that unity is our strength and diversity is our power, and that resonates in more than a notion.
Now, in the book, you write about emotional intelligence. And just now you spoke about your mom teaching you all to, first of all, know yourself. How has that guided you in acknowledging the fact that you've constantly learned about yourself? How can you speak to that particularly for those aspiring leaders? How important is it for you to continuously learn about who you are?
That was a tough chapter to write because I had to be honest with my flaws and my strengths. I had to be honest about being true to myself and who I was not. I was busy being the principal, the elder, minister of music. I was all those things, but Tyrone was lost. And I had to find Tyrone because I couldn't be a good leader until I found me. And so once I was able to be honest with myself, I was able to lead my school in a better fashion because I knew who I was, not just as a leader, not just as other things I do, but I knew who I was at the core. And so it took me a while to find that. It took me a lot of reflection, study, practice, and hard work for me to find me. But once I found me, I was better to my teachers, better to my community, and better to my family.
Now, the last question I have, and I think this is key for all of those people that you've influenced. You spoke or you wrote about your relationship with Mrs. Clark and how she guided you, some tough, but some support, almost being that bridge and the barrier. The bridge to get you over the troubled water, but that barrier to protect you from some things. How important is it for you to be that for other people?
Well, it is important as leaders, especially black male leaders, that we pay it forward, because unity really is our strength and diversity really is our power, and together we really are better. If we pay it forward, then that means the next generation stands to do a better job than we did. And so she did that for me. You know, when my mom passed, I fell back on Miss Clark. And like she said, some of those days when our good days, I came in the principalship thinking I knew everything because I had a good skill set as an assistant principal. But there was a big difference being an assistant principal and being the principal. And once I realized that I had to grow as a leader, honestly, and was true to myself, I was better to everybody else.
And I will close us out by saying this man is telling the truth. I followed him from his assistant principal role. When he moved to principal, I followed him into the assistant principal seat that he had been sitting in. And I think I had been on the job a couple of days before I received the first phone call to say, hey, man, I've sat in your seat. I can help you. I will help you. I'm a phone call away. Call me if you need me. And I think what he mentioned as being an example for not only as a example of a black male leader, but just being a leader, period. He exemplified, he modeled it, and that was 20 years ago. And I really appreciated it then, and I appreciate it now. So want to close with wishing you the best, encouraging everyone to go out and buy the book, More Than a Notion. You can get it on Amazon. Follow Dr. Burton on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Dr. Tyrone Burton. Thank you for joining us for a wonderful event tonight. We're appreciative for all those that joined, and definitely want to give a shout out to all of our panelists and guests that joined us to give their insight. Thank you very much, and go out and get the book.